Hello.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good, 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 good. Just want to take a minute to check from the back end. Is there anything that we need to do, or are we good to go? Okay, I guess I'm going to take that as a good. So, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. My name is Okwemi. I'm a consultant, and I also serve as Vice President for Human Resources at the Green Institute. It's been an amazing day, and really proud of the team. So, congratulations to everybody. And it's my pleasure and my honor to be joined here by Farmer Ogbole Samson. Thank you so much for joining us. So I could read your biography, I could read your resume, but how about you just take the first minute and you just share with the audience what you would like us to know about you before you jump in?
Okay, so Farmer Samson Ogbole is a farmer, first and foremost. And for me, I believe food production should not be seasonal because hunger itself is not seasonal. And as someone growing up and living in a developing nation, we realize that because of seasons, naturally, there is always a fluctuation in prices of food based on the availability or scarcity of the food or whether or not that food is in season. So I believe that one of the ways to ensure that we can drive down the price of food is to ensure the non-seasonality in food production. However, much more than that, I also believe that the process of food production should be such that it must be healthy for the farmer, it should be healthy for the consumer, and
Certainly.
also healthy for the environment. And the only way to do this is to have climate smart tools that ensures efficiency and protection as well as productivity for the farmer vis-a-vis the consumer and the environment. So my whole job or my whole work around the agricultural sphere is to ensure food production is not seasonal. Much more than
Mm-hmm.
that, the process of food production and the product of food production should be healthy for the farmer, the consumer, and the environment.
That's awesome. I really appreciate the very multi-pronged approach that you take, thinking about sort of from the entire life cycle of food production. So I'd be curious for our more global viewers, tell us a little bit about your journey specifically in Nigeria, right? Because sort of, from the outside looking in, you're like, Nigeria, it's hot all the time. What role does seasonality play in the food production experience in Nigeria? And that's one question. Number two, have your experiences been focused on Nigeria or globally? And thinking about any experiences you might want to share on the impact specifically of seasonality on food production, since that's such a focus for you.
All right. Thank you. So for seasonality, I would like to take one of the most consumed crops in Nigeria, tomatoes. In a week or two, the price of tomatoes is going to crash in the market where you'll be buying a basket of tomatoes for about 4,000 to 5,000 naira. And
Mm.
that is because we are entering that period where farmers are able to produce more than enough. Now,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, as farmers produce more than enough, the price of tomatoes crashes. But majority of these tomatoes will still go to waste at the end of the day. When you get to October, November, December, the price of tomatoes again will go back up. So that is because of seasonality in production. Another example is maize. Um, as typical Nigerians, there are times you are not expecting to see maize on the streets because
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is not the time for maize. And there
Right.
are times you expect to see maize on the street and it is really cheap.
Right.
Same happens to every other crop. I mean, in the eastern part of Nigeria, we have things like New Yam Festival. We have New
Mm-hmm.
Yam Festival because we are celebrating the production of new yam, which
Mm-hmm.
means before then, there was readily no available newly harvested yam. So whatever yam you found in the market before then were yams that have been harvested for long, waiting to break dormancy for them to replant. So you realize that the seasonality of food production is one of the major reasons why food itself is super expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So my own path, or the gap I am trying to fill, is if we can imagine the cheapest a crop can be, if we can imagine the cheapest a crop or a product can be in the market when it is in season,
Mm-hmm.
now imagine having a technology to produce that food all year round.
Mm-hmm.
It automatically means that the cheapest a food can be in a year becomes the normal price of that food all year round.
Certainly.
I don't know if that makes any sense. So
Certainly. Yes.
with that, you realize that at the basic level, food is already becoming cheap.
Mm-hmm.
However, in trying to bring in the technology, there is a need to ensure the technology is also climate smart.
Right.
Why? We do not want to ensure that we are feeding people, but at the same time burning down the planet. So
Certainly.
we don't want to win in one area and lose in another area. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a need to ensure that as the food production is going on, the same process at the same time is healing the environment. Or worst case scenario, it has no impact on the negative impact on the environment. So
Right.
for those technologies, we also understand something that is fundamental, which is in our work with local farmers in trying to bring in technologies and all of that, we understand something that is so paramount to them, which is they do not want to spend so much more for nothing. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a need that we always balance technology adoption with
Right.
increased profitability, which
Certainly.
is seen via efficiency and productivity. So when we bring in a technology that increases productivity and efficiency, the farmers are now much more willing to adapt. So I will take a personal example. I remember 2013, 2014, one of the major issues that Nigerian farmers had, Nigerian farmers. So yam is one of our staple crops in Nigeria that we eat locally.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons why yam has been so expensive in the market is because for farmers to plant yam, you have to get a tuber. So let
Mm-hmm.
me use maize, for example, for it to make sense. If I take a maize cob and I want to plant my maize grain, a single cob could give me as much as 50 to 100 seeds.
Right.
So it means that the multiplication ratio from a single cob is between 50 to 100 seeds. So a single cob can produce 50 plants or 100 plants. But you
Certainly.
realize that when it comes to yam, traditionally, a single tuber of yam weighing about 1 kg could give you just 3 tubers of yam when you
Mm.
cut and replant. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
meant essentially that for the farmers, they had to save some of their harvest so that
Right.
they would have something to plant in the future. Now,
Right.
with that, it essentially meant that for any farmer going into yam production, when it is time to sell, they would have to charge you for what you are buying and what they are
Right.
keeping for
Certainly.
next planting season. Now,
Mm-hmm.
with aeroponics technology, so aeroponics is growing plants in the air without the use of soil, we
Okay.
have been able to have a way now to provide clean seed yams that farmers can use to plant their farms. And with the availability of clean seed yams, you realize that over time, the price of yam is gradually coming down. Yes,
Okay.
it's not dropping as fast as we want it. The reason is because
Mm-hmm.
the farms that are getting these clean seed yams have not gotten to the level where they are able to produce all year round. But
Right.
their cost of production has come
Mm.
down drastically, up to
Significantly.
like
Right.
40, 50%, just because of the cheaper price now for buying seed yams. So they are
Wow.
able to sell off all the yams they harvest because they know that they are not going to have to pay so much to get clean planting materials.
Right. That's really interesting. And I know that a theme of this entire conference has really been to focus on the intersections. How does education intersect with the business, intersect with some of the environmental concerns? And I think your discussion really highlights that. I wonder aloud, in addition to your discussion around seasonality, what role some of the infrastructure and institutional challenges of working in a place like Nigeria brings about. So, for example, I know just from personal knowledge that one of the significant issues is the loss in sort of crop value or loss in crops from transporting them to farm to market because bad roads, because, poor refrigeration, so on and so forth. So I'm curious to the extent that that has been impactful, sort of the larger institutional challenges of working in Nigeria have impacted your work, and what you're hearing from your farmers in terms of how that's impacting their ability to be successful as they deal with the seasonality issue.
So yeah, thank you. So one of the things we have been trying to push for like maybe 3-4 years now is what we call urban and peri-urban farming.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we've been trying to push that is because as a person, I believe that we cannot leave our problems to the government to solve.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot do that. And there is a need to ensure that as farmers, we have to come together and ask ourselves, what solution can we provide by ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
such that when we have tangible results, those in power by default will want to key into it.
Right.
And the way that works is by having farms in urban areas and peri-urban areas. Hence, one of our major things we've been pushing is what we call soilless farming, that is, growing plants without the use of soil, such
Mm-hmm.
that in urban centers like Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, Calabar, you can have farms literally in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with farms in the city, I don't have to harvest down based on the market I am expecting, which
Right.
means to a large extent, I have been able to deal with the issue of storage in my own micro
Okay.
scale. Number
Right.
two, because my farm is in the city, most of the issues I would have with transportation, because I am coming from miles and miles away from
Mm-hmm.
the city, is taken care of. However, because we still understand that majority of the farmers are in the rural areas,
Mm-hmm.
so we tell the rural farmers, focus on crops that are not highly perishable.
Okay.
Focus on the things like yam, things like cocoa, things like cashew and the rest, such that even if it takes your product a week, 2 weeks to get to the market, the value does not depreciate because of the time it takes. Now, as we are able to collect data from every farmer that we work with, over time, we believe at some point, somebody somewhere would want to take interest and say, okay, how is this thing being done? Can we make it bigger? What would it take to get it bigger? Now, at
Right.
that point, we can then start looking at, okay, let's take care of this aspect, let's take care of this aspect and all. But I believe we cannot get to the point of having a proper dialogue with government if we are not successful at the micro scale with data to back up our productivity.
Certainly.
Because it is easy to say, okay, the roads are not good. It is easy to say there is no storage system, so
Mm-hmm.
we are losing XYZ crop. But much more than that, how much data do we actually have to back it up? So when
Right.
we are now able to say, oh, there is a farm in Ikoyi producing 10 tons of tomatoes using the vertical system, and they have 1% loss. Now, when we move towards Ikorodu, they are having 5% loss because they have to travel so and so kilometers to get to the market.
Right.
Then we realize that when we move to maybe Ibafo area, about another 20 or so kilometers from Lagos, they have this percentage of loss because of this and this. So if we are able to mitigate this and this is going to be the value in Naira and Kobo, very important.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, anybody you are bringing in is not so concerned about fixing a problem that does not bring money to the table, that does not contribute to the economy. So
Right.
when we are able to say, oh, you are making this, we are making this loss and this loss based on statistics gathered from so many of what's it called, different farmers. But
Yes,
if we can put this in place and put this in place, we can cover up this gap.
right.
And let me also add that to a large extent, this is why investing in agriculture also has been a bit difficult for investors, because they do not really have a place to go and check the data available to say, these are the loopholes, these are the gap, this is what I am likely to make. So if I put in X Naira, this is when I am going to get Y out of the system, based
Right.
on the track, the number of plants and all of that coming in.
Okay. That's excellent and raised a lot of great questions, but I did want to give the audience an opportunity to ask any questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them, and I will reference them. But I did want to get back to you, Farmer Samson, and ask a bit about your own personal journey, about how you ended up in farming and agriculture and why that is so important to you.
Okay, so first, I started off studying medicine with Madonna University. My passion was to find a way to do something that was really tangible, like something really tangible. And
Mm-hmm.
in the course of medicine, in my, I think, fifth year or so, I got in touch with some top guys in medicine, and they were like, no, if really you want to make a change, you need to study a course that actually affects people's life. That medical doctors, yes, they are awesome, they are great, but they are more at the end of the delivery system.
Right.
So you will not go hear something like a medical doctor has discovered this drug or that drug. And fortunately for me, at that point, my school was having issues with accreditation. Then I was with Madonna University. So it was a perfect time for me to switch to
Okay.
biochemistry. So I
Okay.
left Madonna to Ogbole University, finished up with biochemistry. At the time I was done with biochemistry in Nigeria, we have this National Youth Service Corps, which is kind of compulsory.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately for me, I was posted to IITA, International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, for my
Okay.
compulsory 1 year service. When I got there, I was fortunate to work with Dr. Nobet Maria, the head of Yam Improvement for Income and Food Security in West Africa. And
Okay.
while I was with him, he showed me agriculture from a different perspective. Because
Mm-hmm.
growing up, agriculture has been that where people who are poor go into, where the guys that are not educated come into. So it was more like a road to poverty once you say you want to become a farmer. But through Dr. Maria, he exposed me first to the research and development aspect of agriculture, which
Okay.
aligned perfectly for me with my biochemistry background. Because with a background in biochemistry, I already understood the nitty-gritty of human function in the system and all of that, and
Right.
the role that food has to play. So in my introduction to agriculture, it answered my fundamental question, which I had had for a long time, which was I realized that in the lab, when, let me take an example, let me use tomatoes. So in the lab, we know that one of the major antioxidants in tomatoes is lycopene.
Mm-hmm.
And from theory, we already know that one of the jobs of lycopene is to prevent prostate cancer in men. But
Right.
the reality was we have more men still getting prostate cancer despite the fact that we are eating tomatoes. And it
Certainly.
had always bugged me that it was one of two things. It is either they lied to us in school that tomatoes contain lycopene that can prevent prostate cancer,
Yeah.
or the tomatoes we were eating were
We're
fake.
not as, yeah. Oh, well, that's
It
true.
had to be one of those two. So
Yeah.
on getting to IITA, I had the chance to work with tomatoes. So I remember then Dr. Maria goes, yeah, why take tomatoes that you grew yourself only? Go to the open market and buy and check them out and all of that. And
Right.
I realized that there was a whole lot already going wrong on the farms based on what we got from the market.
Mm,
And it dawned on me, you cannot correct food in the kitchen if it is already
right.
destroyed from the farm. So
Right.
there is a need to find a way to correct food from the farm. And
Right.
in trying to correct from the farm, I started having interactions and I started realizing, oh, the farmers are having major issues when it comes to production because for them, they are looking for the fastest way out to get profit.
Right.
Now, technologies that were available were super expensive. So there was a need to find how can we make technologies available that are cheap, that allows the farmers to easily adopt it. So luckily, I had a course with University of Wageningen around that point, Netherlands, and they taught me
Mm-hmm.
something called ABCD. And that simply means asset-based community development, which is when you get into a community, instead of just throwing a technology at them, there is a need to understand the assets that they already have and find
Mm-hmm.
a way to use the principle of that technology with the assets that they have available.
Okay.
That way, there is higher adoption. So, my love in agriculture is finding a way to correct food system as a
Mm-hmm.
way to prevent diseases in the population.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think we have time for two more questions, and I just wanted to share that I'm not historically someone who is like, a farmer or really interested in, but your passion is amazing, and I really appreciate, I think,
Thank
the
you.
holistic view that you've taken. And I think it's a very interesting pivot from medicine to agriculture, but the way you tell your story, it makes perfect sense. And I agree. And I think about, the experiences people in the US or other places where I've lived that are really excited about, farm to table and it being really, really healthy. And luckily for us in Nigeria, that's sort of how we eat anyways. But I think your point about, is the food right from the source? If it gets to your table, is it really doing all the things that you say it's going to do? I think is excellent. So in our last few minutes together, I just wanted to ask you two quick questions if you could answer in 30 seconds. Number one, what is one challenge you could use the community's help with? What is something that you've been struggling, a question that you've been sort of struggling with that you would like the community to help you think about? Number one. And number two is, what are you excited about, right? I know 2020 has been a very odd year for us in many ways, but what are you very excited about and looking forward to either personally or professionally?
Okay, so the major issues right now is how to translate the message we have into local dialects because of the language barrier. It's easy when I'm talking to youth, to guys who are educated, who understand English, but there is a need to find a way to have these messages in local dialect so people understand. What am I most excited about in 2020? Yeah, that's the fact that I remember when we started Soilless Farming, people called me wizard. People said it was abnormal, but now it's no longer a question of, are you breaking nature? Are you
Yeah.
going against God? It's much more or less a thing of how much money can I make? And when Nigerians start asking how much money can I make,
You're moving in the
you
right
have won
direction.
the fundamental party. So yeah.
That's great. And Augustina, who shared a comment on Facebook, I share your sentiment that, I do think that Farmer Samson has a really strong voice and is incredibly passionate. And I hope that the folks who are listening have been able to sort of garner some of his energy. I know that I'm incredibly excited to talk to you. And yes, please be in touch with Farmer Samson and continue to follow his work. But with that, I think we're going to wrap up and say thank you so much for taking the time to join us
much.
today. Really, really appreciate it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.